Welcome to On Leadership, a midweek podcast from HTBB. We believe leadership is a posture, not a position, and in the same way postures can be improved, leaders can grow. We want to encourage you to keep going and to equip you with practical ways to grow as a leader. Thanks for tuning in to On Leadership.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of On Leadership. Today, at the time of recording, it is the 10th of January, which means it's not too late to say Happy New Year to all of you watching today. Here with us, we have Dato Sri Idris Jala, who is the Executive Chairman of PEMANDU Associates, which is a management consulting firm. He is also the co-chairman of the Sunway Group, within which he is also the Pro-Chancellor of the Sunway University. On top of that, he's also the chairman of Heineken Malaysia. So very, very good to have you with us today. Also, fun fact, to add to that very impressive CV, he's also my dad. So today what we're going to have is a casual father-son sit-down as we talk a little bit about leadership. But on that note, we are in the new year, and as people are doing their kind of New Year's resolutions, I think what we want to talk about today is how to 10x your goals. So thank you for joining us, Dad. On that note, maybe we can start with what are your New Year's resolutions?
Well, the New Year resolutions that I have is with my team in PEMANDU. I had a good chat with the two joint managing directors, both Lavin and Woody. We were discussing about how to set targets for the year that they both agree they cannot achieve based on the current way of doing it. So basically, it will force them to find new ways to doing it. It's essentially about 10x the goals, the achievements we had in previous years. I mean, really, that's what we're doing. So that's fantastic. So there had been a meeting between him and within them and also the team to really chart out the plans for doing that. That's good. And also, as it turns out, next week we're also having our away day for Sunway Group to set really ambitious Olympics target, almost impossible targets.
So I think I'm going to stop you there because you mentioned impossible targets. Okay. And for those of you who don't know, one of my dad's sort of key mottos is this thing that you call the game of the impossible. Can you tell us a little bit about this game of the impossible?
By definition, the word impossibility, it means to set targets that you consider that you cannot achieve based on current way of doing it. And so that means when you set those targets, you are forced to look for new ways to do it. That's really what an impossible target's all about. Really forcing you to transform your way of doing it in order to achieve it.
Yeah, and I think it might also be worth talking about your upbringing. You had a rather unique upbringing, growing up in the jungles of Borneo. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and whether or not that has perhaps conditioned you to be a bit more adept at pursuing this game of the impossible?
I suppose it has conditioned me in many ways. I always believe that a lot of things about context. I was brought up bred in the jungle. It's very tough out there. I mean, we were the nearest town, it would take about 2 weeks to get through by walking in the jungle as well as going by boat. And things were very, very, very difficult. And so my great ancestors were headhunters. Real.
Yeah, this is not corporate headhunters. Yeah, this is like really people that will just chop your head off.
And so in that environment, but fortunately Christianity came in there. So in some sense, it brought a new enlightenment to them. So this idea of headhunting had stopped many, many generations ago. My father was a son of the chief, but he decided not to become a chief, to take over from my great-grandfather, but he decided to become a teacher. So I was fortunate that my father was a teacher in the classroom. When I got back, I had to continue to do my homework. And so in many sense, the discipline that came from my dad had played a really big part in figuring that out. I also remember when I was a kid, we had the British soldiers that came to the village because it was the Indonesian confrontation. And the British soldiers were there. They put some barbed wires in the open field, and the soldiers were watching movies within the barbed wire fence area. And we were finding a way to watch the movie from behind the screen behind the barbed wire, if you wish. So all the while, when I grew up, I thought Elvis Presley was left-handed because we were watching him playing that way much later. But the key point about raising that story was, for the first time in the jungle, I saw that there was a world behind the mountain. And so my father, being the teacher, we opened many of the schools there, and also my other teachers, they drilled something amongst us as kids. If you fail your exam, you will not see that world. The passport to see that promised land, the world beyond the mountain, was passing the exams. So it was such an important thing. So in many sense, this idea of seeing the world behind the mountain, the one we saw in the movie, that world existed. And that world was far better world than the one we had in the jungle. And therefore, it was, for me, it was a matter of life and death to pass the exams.
How do you encourage regular people who don't have the same conditioning to pursue the game of the impossible?
Yeah, I always believe that the game, the impossible, is something for everyone. Whether you come from the jungle, from the city, it is relevant to everyone. The reason is simply this. Most of us believe that there are so many things that we cannot attain and cannot achieve. And so, but we cannot set goals that are impossible because of the fear of failure. And I always believe that if you set targets that are impossible to achieve based on current way of doing it, and if you conquer the fear of failure, it's amazing what you can do. And it's absolutely amazing. And if you take on a very different approach to doing things, a transformational approach to doing it, as John Ruskin once said, the best reward for a man's toil is not what he gets from it, but what he becomes of it. In pursuit of this game of the impossible, you transform to become a much, much better leader and much better person. So in a way, if you pursue this game, the impossible, it is just a fantastic thing for everybody, not just about achieving the target, but at the same time, the transformation that happens to you in pursuit of that game of the impossible. But you have to conquer the fear of failure.
Yeah. How do you encourage people to conquer that fear of failure, especially within PEMANDU or some of the other organizations?
Maybe the best way, Leon, for me to give you a real example so that people can understand exactly how to do it. When I left Shell, 23 years I worked in Shell. I was in London, I was in Holland, and in Malaysia for a very long time. I was appointed then to become the managing director of Malaysia Airlines. It was the worst financial result in the airline at that time. We had 2.5 months of cash. We were a company that was, if we didn't change the way in which we did it, ran the business, we would run out of cash in 2.5 months. So my conversation with the board was, I asked them, is it an impossible target? They said yes. The next question I asked the board is it worthwhile to pursue? They said yes. Then I put it to the board that if you say it's impossible target, but it's worthwhile to achieve, if I fail, is it okay? They said it's okay. That's a conversation that leads to a constructive point when everybody reach a consensus that this is an impossible target. And if I fail, it's okay. And therefore, I conquered the fear of failure. That conversation is key. And so you have to find a conversation so that it leads a point when everybody said it's okay. And that's how you conquer the fear of failure.
Yeah, I think that's very good. It's a good way to, it's I don't know, is it almost coercive?
Yeah.
But I think, but what I want to ask is then, how do you ensure that people don't take that to be almost a cop-out, a get out of jail free, because, oh, it's okay if I fail, so how do you, how do you ensure that it gets done?
Yeah. That's a very good question. There are two things you have to do to make sure that doesn't happen. The first one is to publish the target, the impossible target, so that it becomes public. Yeah. That means there is a public acknowledgement that this is it. So really the publishing is giving you no place to hide. That's one. The second one is, apart from publishing that, you need to publish a range of target. The impossible target is really set the highest bar. Then you have a target that's a realistic target. So within this range, you know the range of possibilities. So you know that if you have to achieve it, the minimum you have to get there is the realistic target. But the highest range where you really push everybody is the Olympics, the impossible target. So the beauty of the range is that it doesn't demoralize the team within the realm of possibilities. And therefore, it becomes real because the commitment is there. So coming back to the earlier point, when you publish it, you become completely pregnant with a commitment to achieve it. Pregnancy meaning to say that when you're wholly pregnant, there's only one consequence you have to deliver.
Let's talk a little bit about delivery. You know, I think in your past and even before PEMANDU Associates, when you were with Shell and when you were with MAS, Malaysia Airlines, you've developed somewhat of a track record of being the turnaround guy, being able to take companies and businesses from impossible situations to becoming profitable. Obviously, over the years of doing this, I think you've distilled this into a bit of a science. Can you tell us a bit about that methodology and the science behind this?
The science behind it is what is encapsulated in what is called the 8-step big fast result methodology. And let me take you through one by one. The first step is to bring the leadership of the organization together to discuss and agree two things. One, the impossible target. Two, the key priorities to achieve the impossible target. And that is a very, very important discussion. Many times people in any organization just charge to do things, get the whole organization to doing, and it's not linked to the target, it's not linked to the key priorities, and therefore that's panacea for disaster. You cannot achieve big things. Now, if you have done that, step one, the step two would then be to assemble the best and the brightest brains in the company and the organization and put them in a lab. A laboratory is none other than a 6 weeks or 8 weeks condensed environment where the best and brightest people inside the organization sit down there and figure out for each of the identified key priorities. Work the details. Who is going to do what, when they're going to do, how they're going to do it to achieve the impossible targets. And that's 6 to 8 weeks. When you finish that step two, then you have to move to step three. Step three is you bring the whole organization along to review and discuss the recommendations of the laboratory in detail, providing input and to achieve buy-in. And that's a very important discussion because you need to bring the whole organization, if you like, the troops, to come on board with this adventure. And the step number 4 is to write down in a blueprint that you disseminate to everybody, to the board, to organization, so that everybody are now becoming pregnant. Again, you publish it with the key performance indicators, the targets and the key priorities and who is going to do what. When you publish it, you then realize that everybody now is committed to achieving it, right from the leadership to the middle managers, right down to the staff that are involved. Then step number 5 is to take the key targets and cascade it to all the people within the organization. So everyone has got the key performance indicators as given to them at the beginning of each year. So that is step number 5. Step number 6 is very, very important. It's called implementation, effective implementation. There are 3 things that are critical in achieving implementation done properly. The first one is to make sure you get the whole organization, having been given the KPIs targets, charged to do it relentlessly. Do it relentlessly. Every single day and every week and every month. Pursue that. Second one is to make sure that there's M, called monitor it continuously. Every week on Friday, you have to have a dashboard, preferably on a smartphone or on iPad, that will show you a traffic light. Every Friday you can see for every single part of the work that is going to be delivered, who is red color, that means they haven't done it, who's green, they have done it, and who's yellow, that they have only partially done it. And the beauty of doing that is this. You can look at everything that's red and everything that's amber, enter into the third aspects of implementation, problem solving, which I call S, solve problem recursively, bringing people together to find solutions to this. So whatever you plan, not everybody can achieve everything at one time. They have to come back recursively to find solutions to it. If I want to digress a little on a light note, I was invited many years ago to speak to the ministers in Moscow, in Russia.
Yeah.
So they were all gathered there, and I gave them the same talk that I talked to you about. And one of the prime minister, deputy prime ministers, and his name is Mr. Shovalov, and he asked me, Mr. Jala, we have a problem in Russia. This traffic light does not work here. I said, what's the problem in Russia? We have the watermelon phenomenon. It means green outside but red inside, and at best possibly yellow. It means to say that sometimes people tell you that they have done it, but actually it hasn't been done. So actually, I then move on to tell him, don't worry, we have step 7. In step 7 is called verification.
Yeah.
Every year we have to verify the results to make sure there's no watermelon phenomenon. That means you get external auditors to validate the numbers to see whether they're real and what are the lessons learned from the ones that are they're still red. So that validation is important. Then step number 8, which is the final step, you have an annual appraisal to check where you've done well, where you have not done well, so that you can take remedial action. It is at that time that you can also do staff appraisal. Yeah. Performance appraisal, that's when you reward people who perform. That's also when you do corrective action on consequence management for those who have not achieved it. So you return, the whole loop is the 8-step process. Let me mention, Leon, people want to tell me every time I describe to them, Idris, can we do cherry picking? Step 1 and step 3 and step 8, and let's not do the middle. I said, no, it wouldn't work. Yeah. It may work for low targets, but if you want to achieve Olympics target, big target, you have to go and do the entire thing, because the entire thing tells you many things. One, it tells you, step 1, commitment and leadership. Step 2, it tells you priorities. Step 3, it tells you buy-in from staff.
Yep.
Step 4, it tells you, because you published the document, now you are totally committed to delivering it, the whole organization. Step 5 means you cascade accountability to every staff using the KPI. Step 6 is effective implementation. People are relentlessly, they're doing it. Step 7 is no cheating. The results are real. Step 7, you come back and do a recursive looking at reviewing it to see that you're doing well. So if you take all these steps, I am totally convinced it's like antibiotics. You will get the outcome, you'll get the cure, you get the treatment. But you cannot take antibiotics by saying, I'm not taking the full course, I'm only taking half the course. It's not going to work.
Yeah. That's a very good point, and I think even the bird outside was agreeing with you. I don't know if you guys could hear it chirping away. But I think on that, right, what you're talking about, and I've also had the privilege of working within the organization as well. I was previously working for the digital marketing and communications arm of PEMANDU Associates, and in that time, I mean, there's no hiding the fact that you used the word relentless earlier, and it is relentless work.
Right.
This pursuit of the game of the impossible, but I think on that, given the pandemic of 2020, this idea or this thing of burnout has become almost the buzzword, right? Not just within corporate, but also within ministry. So I think in light of that, how do you create an environment for your teams to be able to relentlessly pursue this game of the impossible, but also without burning out?
Yeah, thank you for raising that. I'm also, as a leader of the organization, very concerned about that phenomenon that people may be driven towards burnout if you're not careful. Yeah. I have 3 very simple rules and steps to make sure that doesn't happen. The first one is to always seek to develop a community of people. That people don't work solo. That's why I like the labs. Most people will set out targets and ask individuals to chase the targets. They normally find themselves very lonely and they really don't know where to run and seek support. So when I set impossible target, we run the lab, that's a community. There's 6 people or 8 people in the room or 10 people in the room. Owning this challenge that they work together. If anyone feel despondent that they need help, there's someone else in the room that's also sharing in the burden. And so I think this community idea is a very important one. In many sense, that's a very jungle and tribal thing. Longhouse, absolutely. So that's the first thing that you do. The second thing as a leader in the organization is to really encourage people to pick up a hobby or a passion. That has nothing to do with work. And so I really encourage people, choose your hobby that you're passionate about and chase it. Because I always find sometimes if work can become, let's say, a negative force, you need something that's positive force to nullify it. And so in my case, I love music and I love guitars.
Yeah, I think our viewers can probably see that as well. If you can see this array of guitars over here. Tell us a bit more about your little hobby.
Yeah, in 30 years in my corporate life, I only own 3 guitars, thereabout. But in the pandemic, since 2020, and I pick up an entirely new hobby because I'm stuck at home, suddenly I got really interested in guitars. So I studied on YouTube precisely how to assemble guitars, about pickups, about soldering, and all sorts of things about them. So in the last 2 years or so, I've developed that hobby. So I learned to buy from AliExpress relatively cheap guitar bodies from China, and very nice wood, by the way. So I did that. And they're not very expensive. And I also can buy good necks, guitar necks from Mexico. They're actually licensed by Fender, so their proper measurement is very, very good. It's because the guitar, if the neck is not good, very difficult to play well. Yeah. And so, and then the parts, the electronics, the pickups, and all of those are very important. I buy them from the US. So you could assemble a guitar if you study on YouTube exactly how to do soldering and all that, study a little bit how to do it. And so actually I have a guitar that I'm very proud of, and what I did was, apart from all that, I found on the internet a very nice design, which is paisley design, Indian paisley design. So I found a guy in the town who could print it onto the guitar. On the guitar, 3M paper. Yep. So I glued that, stuck it onto the paper, and then you can polish it and buff it, and it's fantastic. So when you can produce something like that, and you are assured there is a limited edition of one, and it's built by your own hands. Yep. And it's a wonderful thing. You can feel really, really proud that you've done that. Yep. I mean, nobody's paying me to do it, but I'm doing it because it's such a passion. I love doing it. So I have now actually assembled for myself about 15 guitars.
Just 15? It looks like a lot more than 50 here.
Yeah. Of course, it's more than 15.
That's officially what you tell mom.
No. So the 15 is the one that I assembled. I found out later that there are other people who can do the assembly work much better than I do. I found Julian Mokhtar, who is the lead guitarist for the Blues Gang. He's a very good luthier, by the way. Luthier is a term that describes a guy that builds guitars. So I have the concept for what I want. I buy the parts, exactly the body, the neck, etc. And I give him the design. I said, I want you to make a guitar, a custom guitar, based on this idea. And so I realized that he's much better at the soldering for me. He's far better at buffering the guitar. And so the output is far better than what I did. I found a guy in the US too, William Harden. He's also a very, very good guy. So he's also passionate about it. So I designed the full concept, what I want, and I tell him exactly how I want it, and he will do it. And I find if I do this, and doing it like this, it's far better quality. So they have helped me to do some of the work. I still think that the brain is still mine because I designed it, I wanted it like that, but the execution is theirs because they're far better at the execution than me.
So this is like the community that you talked about earlier. You've taken the lab from PEMANDU, from your work context, but also into your love for guitars.
Absolutely, and that's the way to do it. Sometimes you find other people that are smarter and better than you. So if you find that community of people, you pull them together, and then the total work of everybody will produce an outstanding piece of work.
Yeah, and I mean, you've never built any. I know you had one attempt many years ago. That was a very bad one,
very bad.
I may say so. I still remember it. I think you also had some kind of paisley or like floral element, but it was very poor. And then, so you basically went from pretty much having no ability to create or build a guitar to then, in a very short space of time, having your 15. So if we're talking about how to 10x your goals, this is an example of how to 15x your goals, not just in a work context, but also with your passions. So I think that's very, very good. Speaking of things that we picked up during the pandemic, can you tell us a little bit more about what that was like for you guys at PEMANDU Associates? I mean, you've been always spending time doing turnaround for your clients and other companies, but now you're in this unique position where you've got to do it, continue to see to your clients, but now also manage your own sort of crisis internally.
Well, the pandemic was, as you know, is unprecedented. It's something we've never seen before. So, when you enter a crisis, the first thing that leadership has to do is to declare a crisis. And that's very important. So we declare the crisis. Then we form a crisis team led by me to figure out how to do that. In our case, we had only 2.5 months of cash, because our business model before was every end of the year we empty the pot, if you like, and distribute to the partners and the staff, leaving very little cash in the company. But obviously that does not work for a prolonged pandemic like COVID-19. So what we then did was, in March, when the government announced the first MCO, the lockdown, we declared a crisis. And at that time, we decided that we're going to figure out how to do it. So I brought the entire team in PEMANDU, you remember that, and the team, I gave them a choice. We all vote, equal voting. I've never done this anywhere in my corporate life. I have one vote. Managers, each manager has a vote, including staff, equal. We gave 3 options. Option 1, close down the company. Option 2, mothball the company, meaning to say that we close down the company. 3 years down the road, when the pandemic is gone, reopen the company. Whoever wants to join can join. And the third option is radically reconfigure the organization. That means half the organization, massive salary cut, and massive cost reduction. And then we voted. 96% of the staff voted for option 3, we reconfigure the organization. So as a result of doing that, in 1 month, we were able to reconfigure the organization. I went on a voluntarily 100% pay cut. So the whole of 2020, I had 0 salary, and my partners had 70% pay cuts. The senior managers 50% pay cuts, and the rest of the staff, the junior staff, 10% pay cut. And we made sure that it's fair in that sense. And we started to pivot. And the challenge I gave to the team was, I know we've never done programming before. Can we develop in 1 month an impossible target to develop the global COVID index that rank every country in the world on a daily basis, which is the best and which is the lowest. And I would like that index to be the only index is approved and endorsed by WHO. I can tell you, we did achieve that in 1.5 months. And it was endorsed by WHO, and we had many discussions with even the Director General, Dr. Tedros, on Zoom call, and his team, countless nights that we were talking with them about the minute aspect of how to do it.
Yeah, and I have to say that, I was partly involved in this project as well. And even me, I'm your son, and I've seen you, I've seen you develop and do all of these impossible things. But I mean, this one, I have to say, even I thought, hey, this thing won't work,
I kind of think that I really wanted to do it. I told them we have to do something that is really topical. And so we even got Harvard University involved. We made a lot of discussions with the Gates Foundation because they have a similar index that is for public health index. So when we pull it all together, we refer to the Oxford index as well. We pull it together. I'm pleased to say that this is the only index that up to now I know that's endorsed by WHO. And to be clear, every single day we rank every country. Malaysia, for what it's worth, right now we are number 6 at the moment.
Oh wow!
Number 6.
Because I remember when we first launched the Global COVID-19 Index, or GCI, I think at that time we were also hovering around
Yeah.
this area, right? The top 10 or something
Yeah.
like that. And then I remember it just very quickly unraveled.
Absolutely.
After. So we're back.
Yeah,
Top
we're
six,
back.
top
There
10
was a
now.
time, I think the worst of last year, we were down to 130.
Wow.
But what we did was also I took the opportunity. I contacted Sir Michael Barber,
Yep.
who heads a consultancy firm in London. So his team and my team approached the top 20 countries in the world who are doing really well in managing the crisis. So we picked up all the lessons learned from every single one of those countries and codified them in a book. We call it the Pathfinder document, which we made available free of charge to all countries in the world so that they can learn from the best practices. And the key here is that we wanted to make sure that this is the way in which the world can recover. So the tools are available for people to learn. So the reason why we're into that discussion is that we did that work was truly impossible because no one in my organization had done programming. But we, within 1.5 months, we were able to produce that. And the whole of the year 2020 and the whole of the year 2021, every single day, we've been able to rank 184 countries on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I mean, adding to your point earlier on, the importance of external validation, you guys also won an award for the GCI. Am I correct? There was a WITSA award.
That's correct. And WITSA stands for World IT and Services Alliance Award. And that is, we got the Chairman's Award, that's been the #1 award. This is an alliance is formed of 75 countries in the world. I'm very proud because it's an IT award for excellence. I mean, when you think about, no one in the right mind would think that PEMANDU, a small firm that's made of management consultants, can turn up and become the winner of that global award for IT excellence and innovation. I'm very proud. And that's truly an example of how we could pivot during the crisis to really pursue the game of the impossible, to do things that we've never done before.
Yeah, I think I think it was very good for me to also watch that happen because I think this is the first kind of sort of turnaround where I was also involved and I was sitting within the organization and almost had front row seats in watching this unfold. So that was really, really great to watch. I think that the next thing I want to ask is really, how do you ensure that, in this pursuit of doing things differently, but also doing things fast, and given that, corruption is rife in this country and maybe in some senses normalized within doing the way we do business, how do you ensure that your decisions made are also ethical, and how do you encourage the team to do the same?
Yeah, as a point of departure, I like to see things in 3 compartments, and I call them circles. The white circle, meaning to say these are things that are proper, legal, and right to do. And the black circles, that are things that are wrong, that are illegal, that's corrupt. And there is also the gray circle in the middle, meaning to say that things in the middle are the ones that are not quite wrong, not quite right, not quite corrupt, but not quite right as well. How do you tackle these ethical things that are in the middle? But I mean, there's two in the extreme side. You must always do the things that are white. You must never do the things in the black. Most of the time, it is concerning the things that are in the middle. They call ethical issues. I have very simple practical suggestion how to deal with ethical issues. The first one, if you face an ethical question, never make the decision on your own, because ethical decisions are always made with your conscience, because there's no law that says you can't do that.
Yeah.
And so therefore it's important to make sure it's not just one conscience that make the determination on the right decision, but it's many. So bring it to the board, bring it to the management team, bring it to a group of people so that more people look at the same facts and decide. The second thing that you do as a group is, having now gone through it, document it in great detail, the facts of the case, the options available, the pros and cons for each of the option, and then the reasons behind the choice, why you choose option 1 or option 2. Once you've done that, you then step into the litmus test. The litmus test is this document that we have written. If it gets leaked into the social media, are you okay, yes or no? And if you say, this document, I cannot accept that it get leaked, that means chances are that is the wrong ethical decisions that you're making. It means to say that every decision that you're going to make that is dealing with ethical issues, you must be prepared to defend it in public. Public defense, you must be prepared to stand there and confidently say, this is the reason why we are doing it. And I give you one example. One of my staff and one of the partners actually was facing a very ethical issues in the context of his work. He asked me how to deal with it, and I told him to follow the steps, which he did. As he was writing the document, he hasn't even finished writing the document. He called me. He said, Idris, I've been writing the document halfway through. I'm convinced that this document, I cannot accept it if it's leaked. So, decision made. Yeah. So I always believe that the black and the white, easy to make choices. But the problem is always in the middle, ethical issues. And that's a very simple, practical approach to dealing with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a nice segue into, another thing that you talk about a lot is divine intervention.
Right.
So how do you navigate your Christian faith with being in business?
Yeah, I always tell people in leadership, one of the important aspects of leadership is the acknowledgement that the world is not at our feet, that you can't win all the time, you cannot achieve everything all the time, but there are so many things outside our control. So leadership is about humility. That means humble enough to say that despite everything that I do and my team doing, we can still fail. I'm okay with that. The only thing I ask of our team is that they do their best. And if they fail, it's okay. So that idea of divine intervention is that now who's in charge of life? Some people say it's God for the uncontrollable. Some people say it's, Lilian too would say it's feng shui. Some people say it's luck. And some people say it's fate. Yeah. Whatever it is, I would say 70% of what happens to us is actually not within our control. When I was in Shell, we cannot control oil price. And the whole leadership in the world cannot control the pandemic. Yeah. And so therefore we are, under the burden of many things that we cannot control. So in many sense, as a leader, it then push you to the point of then saying, how do you achieve divine intervention in the things that we do? So if you are a Christian, and I always tell people that you have to pray. You have to pray and seek divine intervention in the things that you do. In Matthew, it says, Matthew 7:7, it says, ask and it shall be given unto you. Seek and you'll find. Knock and the door will be open unto you. So a lot of people just ask in their prayer, but they don't seek. And they don't knock. So I always believe that God wants us to do both. Not only just pray, but also to seek.
Yeah. How do you define the difference between asking and seeking?
The difference is that the asking and the seeking is that one is almost relatively passive. You ask and you pray and you leave it to God in trust. But seeking is now you are pursuing everything I said on the 8 steps. I believe the 8th step is the act of seeking. Really have to do your part. Yeah. In fact, the parable of 3 talents, it's very clear, the parable of 3 talents, the industry, the kingdom of God, when he described it, we really have to put a lot of effort into the things that we do, and we cannot have this phenomenon called durian runtola. And so I think while we pray to God, we really must play our part, because it's very clear, it's very important, ask, seek, and also knock. And I always tell people, the last bit about knock, the door will be open, the door of opportunities. And so I think there are so many doors. Now, when you think about the analogy, the door will be open. But if you don't grab the opportunity, it's also no good. So the door is open, but if you don't take it, as people say, you bring the horse to the water. If the horse doesn't drink, it's also no good. So I think in terms of work, I always believe that in work, while we pray and meditate and ask God for help, God actually wants us to perform our work in the same as the way we worship, in the same way the example of the parable of the 3 talents.
Yeah. Well, that's all that we have for today. Thank you so much, Dad, for taking the time to chat with us and for sharing
Most welcome.
and imparting all of that wisdom. Even just sitting here, these are things that I've heard before, but it's always different every time. There's always something new to take away. Well, you talked a bit about your guitars earlier, and we talked about having a passion. I enjoy having an odd jam with my dad as well. So I think you talked about those guitars. Maybe it's time we take some of those out for a spin.
Sure.
Let's send off this episode with a little jam.
Sure.
Thanks for listening to On Leadership. We hope you found this episode helpful. If you did, why not share it with a friend or post it on social media? Whatever platform you're listening on, don't forget to like, subscribe, or follow and turn on your notifications to receive more great content from HTBV.